First, let's start with your column. The line that really jumped out to me in this is the big takeaway is that the penny has finally dropped for Mr. Zuckerberg, that messaging and social media are very different to users as much as he tried to force them into an unholy mush. What does this mean in terms of the Facebook strategy moving forward?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how they monetize this compared to their business that they have now, which is very lucrative, this idea of posting and putting advertising, targeting advertising next to it. And so it's a great business. It's just that a lot of younger people don't want to do this. They want to be in messaging. So I think, I used the example of Snapchat, but really what Facebook's trying to do is have the qualities of Snapchat, but the success of WeChat in China. So that they can attract more young people to the platform, because that's the number that's falling off, and that's the critical number for Facebook. And so they're pivoting. I guess that's the right word to use here.
Is there any reason to think, Kara, especially given how much Snapchat is sold off in the last year plus, to think that Facebook would try to buy them again?
I don't know about that. I don't know if they would sell to Facebook. That's not a great relationship, given how much Facebook has, they've already taken lots of ideas from Snapchat, like Instagram stories is Snapchat stories, all kinds of things they've been borrowing, and I'm using that in a very nice way, from Snapchat. So I'm not sure if that would be possible. On the other hand, what they can do is borrow ideas, and that's what's happening here. Everything in that blog post was something that Evan Spiegel, the CEO of Snapchat, has been talking about for years and has been doing. It's just not executing well. And I use the comparison between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, because Apple was in dire straits for a very long time, even though Jobs' ideas were the correct ideas, and eventually he was able to pull it out. But one thing that Bill Gates was great at was execution. And so that's why Microsoft was so ascendant way back when. And it's hard to remember that right now, but it's a very similar dynamic in my opinion.
Kara, it seems like when Facebook talks about privacy, it's not necessarily the same as when Snapchat talks about privacy, specifically because Facebook's already got all of this data on the social graph, on people and who they're connected to. It seems like when they pivot toward privacy, really maybe what they're trying to do is just keep people engaged at some level, and then they still get what's valuable. I mean, is this really going to change the user's experience that much if Facebook is talking more about privacy and having more privacy-focused products?
Well, we'll see. The proof is in the pudding. I interviewed Margrethe Vestager, who's the competition, the EU competition head, and she talked about that. She said, we'll see if they do it, if they actually do it. They can talk about it all they want, but let's just see if they'll do it. Obviously, she's been very down on how Facebook treats data of its users, and has been very effective, in Europe at least, about holding them to account. The question is, I also interviewed Amy Klobuchar at South by Southwest, and even she was talking about this idea of if they're pivoting to privacy, they better make sure that that's what they're actually doing. If it's just him talking about it and using it because it's the thing to talk about right now, that's very different than they make significant changes to their business that protects the privacy of users.
I'm glad you brought up that interview with Amy Klobuchar. South by Southwest, one of the things getting a lot of attention here is that proposal from Senator Warren to potentially break up the biggest tech companies. How is that playing out among the tech community in Silicon Valley right now? And would something like that even actually have a chance in heck of becoming reality?
Well, they love it, as you might imagine. One of the things I said, they were just sort of vomiting in their Allbirds here over the issue. I think obviously all these proposals, the billionaire tax proposal, the idea that we should break up big tech, the regulatory thing, I think they're going to welcome some kind of regulation that isn't that. The breaking up part, I don't know. Even Commissioner Vestager said it was a last resort. I don't think that Senator Klobuchar thought that was the first thing we should do. But I think very smart privacy legislation is one thing that's definitely on the table. The idea of holding these companies to account when they violate things, when hacking happens, that they have to tell users immediately. There's some very low-hanging fruit here that really does need to pass in Congress, regulatory, all over the globe. And I think that's what's going to be more to the point. And then watching how these mergers happen. I mean, I can't imagine right now Facebook could buy much of anything. You were talking about Snapchat. I think it would be scrutinized heavily in this Congress, at least. And now that these agencies seem to be getting more teeth, it's going to be more difficult for all tech companies, especially Google, Amazon, and Facebook, to do anything really significant.
Well, to your point, Kara, it seems like buying Snapchat's kind of redundant once you've already taken so much of their work. And then today, I mean, we got yet another upgrade of the stock as they look at DAU and MAU metrics that suggest that engagement, even on the core app, is still pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a huge, from an executional point of view, Mark Zuckerberg is very similar to Bill Gates. Remember when he was just hitting all cylinders when he was CEO of Microsoft? I mean, I think, I always look at these things. Carl, I'm super old, and so I've seen it happen before. These things can go up and down, not very quickly, but in terms of how innovative these companies are. And one thing that happened to Microsoft, besides the antitrust, the monopoly trial, was that they stopped doing innovation and they were focused more on other things than making great products. And I think that, to me, products always win out. And eventually, the jig is up if you don't keep improving your products. And I think Facebook products, he's thinking very hard, and I know they are at Facebook, about whether their product is adequate for the next 10 years. And that's a good thing to think about. And I'm glad he's thinking about privacy, by the way. At least he's rattled over the issue. And so that's not a bad thing for Facebook, which has the most information on the human race ever compiled, thinks about privacy. It's a good thing in that regard, at least.
Yeah, and Kara, since you did just get back from South by Southwest, when you're talking about innovation and sort of what's next on the horizon and what's being developed, your takeaway from that conference and what investors should be keeping an eye on when it comes to the future?
Well, there's never really much that comes out of that conference anymore. It used to be a place where you'd see really cool startups, and there's a lot of great barbecue. But I think the political stuff at South by Southwest was really quite remarkable this year. And you obviously did talk. There was a lot of talk about regulation. Representative Ocasio-Cortez was there. John Kasich I ran into. All kinds of people were there talking about tech and tech issues, which was kind of fascinating to have all the politicians there. I think they were all there. It was really an interesting kind of tone to set for it. And at the same time, I think the idea of the impact of the internet was still being discussed by everyone. I did an amazing interview with Kathy Griffin, a comic, talking about what happened to her when she put that photo she did of Donald Trump, which was very controversial, went viral. She was put on the do not fly list. She was sort of targeted by bots. It was really fascinating. And so I think the impact of tech was what was discussed, and the question is what needs to be regulated and what doesn't. And I think it's great to have this discussion, let's just say that. And that's what Commissioner Vestager talked about. That we're talking about these issues is astonishing, and maybe something really smart can be done to both preserve innovation and protect consumers. And that's the goal that I think is the most important.